The world beyond life is never silent. It whispers, it sighs, it calls. In the oldest tales of the North, beyond the reach of mortal firelight, there lies a realm no warm-blooded heart dares to enter willingly. It is Niflheim, the land of mists, where rivers freeze in their course, and fog coils like pale serpents through valleys that never see the sun. Here, the earth does not breathe with spring. It exhales frost, sharp and merciless, and yet, in its endless stillness, there lingers a strange and aching beauty. The Norse spoke of 9 realms, each bound by Yggdrasil, the world tree. Among them, Niflheim was the coldest and the firstborn, a cradle of rime and shadow. If Asgard gleamed with gold and Midgard pulsed with life, then Niflheim remained the quiet counterpoint, the sigh after the song, the breath after a kiss has faded. It was not simply death, it was the space where warmth surrendered to cold, where fire became memory, and where longing itself seemed to drift upon the fog. At the heart of this domain rests Hel, the daughter of Loki and the giantess Angrboda. Cast down by Odin into the shadows, she became mistress of this half-lit kingdom. And it is here, beneath the veil of mist, that her presence unfurls, not merely as the ruler of the dead, but as a figure who embodies paradox, feared, whispered about, yet misunderstood, and in the strangest way, desired. To speak of Hel is to speak of contrasts. She is both frost and flame, rejection and embrace, horror and allure. Her form divided between the beauty of a maiden and the decay of the grave unsettled gods and mortals alike. They looked upon her as a warning, a reminder of mortality, and yet, within the shrouds of her domain, there lingers a seduction woven through the silence. For in death, there is an intimacy no living heart dares to confess, a surrender no lover can replicate. The Norse believed that not all souls were chosen by the Valkyries to feast in Valhalla. Many, most, were claimed by Hel. Warriors fallen without glory, women who perished in childbirth, farmers, sailors, children, wanderers. Every life lived and lost without Odin's favor drifted into her keeping. And what then? Did they vanish into oblivion? No, they were gathered, embraced, and kept in the hush of her realm. To belong to Hel was not annihilation. It was an eternal intimacy with silence, a closeness to a goddess whose touch was colder than ice, and yet, in its chill, almost tender. Imagine it. The living world above, aflame with desire in song, where fires crackle in long houses and bodies press together for warmth. And beneath it, in the endless fog of Niflheim, another kind of embrace. One that does not burn, but cools. One that quiets the racing heart, stills the trembling hands, and lays all fears to rest. Death, yes, but also release. Death, yes, but also belonging. Hel is not merely keeper of corpses. She is the mistress of longing itself. Every mortal, no matter how bright their fire, must one day dim. And when the last ember fades, it is hell's domain that receives them. That is her paradox, the most feared inevitability, and yet the most certain intimacy. She waits for all, spurned yet inevitable, lonely yet never without company. Poets of the North sometimes dared to whisper of her with reverence, though they cloaked their words in shadow. They hinted that her gaze could pierce beyond flesh, that her touch lingered long after the body had stilled, and that her half-beautiful, half-decayed visage was not only a horror, but a secret seduction. For what could be more irresistible than that which cannot be escaped? She is desire itself, stripped of pretense, the yearning for eternity, the craving for release, the forbidden temptation of surrendering wholly, body and soul. To understand hell, one must walk the edges of firelight. Imagine the long winter nights in Midgard, when frost crept under the doors, when the dead were remembered with whispers and offerings. The living clung to each other, afraid of the silence that surrounded them. Yet in that silence, hell's presence was always near. She was not merely absence, but the shape within it. She was the shadow that caressed the threshold, the mist that kissed the skin, the hush that leaned close to the ear. The gods feared her because they could not control her. Odin cast her into Niflheim to rid himself of her unsettling duality, but in doing so, he gave her sovereignty. No feast in Valhalla could rival the certainty of her embrace. No song of battle could silence the hush of her halls. And while the warriors of Asgard raged against the end, Hel did not rage at all. She simply waited. Waiting, after all, is her deepest art. To step into her realm is to step into a paradox of sensations. The air is bitter, and yet it softens against the skin like a lover's cool touch. The silence is heavy, yet strangely comforting, like a shroud that swaddles the weary. The souls who enter do not cry out. Their voices fade into sighs, into murmurs, into breaths that mingle with the fog. And in every sigh, in every surrender, Hel is there, listening, receiving, holding. She is not the terror the living paint her to be. She is the truth they dare not name. For what is death if not the most intimate of all encounters? It is the stripping away of all pretense, the final yielding of self, the last and greatest act of vulnerability. And Hel is the one who receives it, who bears it, who transforms it into her eternal companionship. Thus, the myth begins not with a battlefield, nor with a hero's triumph, but with a whisper, a shiver, a descent into mist. To know Hel is to step willingly into uncertainty, to gaze upon her dual form and see not only fear, but fascination. She is solitude, but also the promise that no soul is ever truly abandoned. She is longing, but also fulfillment, in a form that unsettles as much as it entices. And so, when the Norse spoke of her halls, Iljudnir,
sprayed with snowstorms, its threshold named stumbling block, its dish hunger, its knife famine. They were not only painting a grim picture of despair. They were, in their way, confessing to the allure of surrender. For every hunger longs to be fed, every famine longs to be ended, and every soul longs to be held. And in hell's embrace, even these harsh truths find resolution. The introduction to her story, then, is not an opening act of terror, but a slow seduction. Step by step, the living are drawn into her dominion. Frost laces their lips, mist curls around their breath, silence presses against their ears, and through it all an unseen presence waits, half hidden, half revealed, a goddess feared for her visage, but desired for her certainty. This is hell, mistress of mists, queen of solitude, daughter of shadow and frost. Feared, misunderstood, whispered about in trembling tones, yet always present, always waiting. To speak of her is to speak of the intimacy between life and death, warmth and frost, desire and surrender. And as her myth unfolds, so too does the truth that every mortal heart secretly knows, that beyond fear lies fascination, and beyond dread a longing too deep to deny. Hell is not merely death's keeper, she is death's seduction. She is the stillness every soul will one day crave, and the silence in which every whisper of desire is at last answered.
When one speaks of hell, it is tempting to whisper only of her domain, of frost and mist and silence. Yet what gives her world its shape is not the stone of her halls, nor the rivers of ice that wind like veins through Niflheim. It is her presence. It is the figure of the goddess herself, standing at the center of her solitude, the pulse of a kingdom made of shadow and sighs. The stories say that Hell's body is divided, one half fair and radiant as any maiden of Asgard, the other darkened, pallid, touched by decay. But to leave the description there is to betray the truth, for her form is not meant to repel. It is meant to draw the gaze, to force it to linger, to awaken the dangerous fascination that stirs in every mortal heart when confronted with contradiction. On one side, her skin gleams pale as moonlight, flawless and smooth, the kind of beauty that makes the air itself lean closer. Her cheek carries a soft flush, her lips the faintest suggestion of warmth, and her hair, falling in dark strands, frames a face that might once have belonged to a goddess of spring. Yet the other half tells another story. The flesh fades, paling further until it resembles marble kissed by frost. Beneath it lies the suggestion of bone, the shadow of what is inevitable. A hollowing of the eye, a paling of the lip, the faintest trace of death's artistry. And it is in this union, life and death bound together, that Hell's true magnetism is found. To behold her is to feel the breath falter in the lungs, to know both dread and desire in the same heartbeat. She is not grotesque, as the fearful say. She is the truth unveiled. She is what every living being carries within,
beauty that fades, vitality that yields, fire that becomes ash. In her body, the hidden is made visible, and what is hidden, once revealed, is always strangely alluring. The gods recoiled from her dual form. Odin, stern-eyed and relentless, cast her into Niflheim, not only because she was Loki's child, but because she unsettled him. He saw in her not weakness, but a power that threatened his order, the power of inevitability, the power of fascination with what cannot be resisted. He feared that mortals might look upon her and see not a monster, but a mirror. And perhaps he was right, for in every eye that meets hers, there lingers a recognition, a shiver of acknowledgement. This too is me.
Yet hell does not rule with wrath. She does not rage against her exile, nor strike her visitors with cruelty. Instead, she reigns with quiet power, with presence, with the gravity of one who does not need to chase affection, because affection, no matter how unwilling, always comes. The souls who enter her halls cannot help but notice her. They arrive trembling, uncertain, and yet in her presence they find something they had not expected. Not fire, not song, not glory, but a gaze that sees them fully. Her eyes are her greatest power. They do not burn, they do not blind. They linger, they weigh, they touch the heart like fingers against a pulse. In their depth is no scorn, no contempt, only recognition. She looks upon the weary and the broken as if she has known them always. And in truth she has. For what soul has not been hers in waiting? What breath has not been destined to falter into her keeping? Her voice is unlike the shouts of the gods or the chants of warriors. It is low, steady, carrying not command but certainty. It slips beneath the skin, weaving itself around the heart. When she speaks, it is not with thunder, but with the sound of silence made articulate, the hush of snow falling, the sigh of mist rolling across stone, the whisper of lips just before they meet. Her words are not many, for she has no need of abundance. Each syllable lingers, drawing the listener closer, making them ache to hear more. And yet for all her presence there is in hell an unspoken vulnerability. To see her is to sense it, subtle as a shadow beneath ice. She has been cast aside, banished, misunderstood. She is feared for what she cannot change, her duality, her nature, her inevitability. Within her solitude lies a longing, quiet and relentless. Not for conquest, she has no hunger for thrones or wars, but for something simpler, something more human, intimacy. For who among the living dares to touch her fully? Who dares to trace their fingers along the warmth of one cheek and the cold pallor of the other? Who dares to love her not despite her duality, but because of it? In the stillness of her halls this longing breathes. It does not scream, it does not weep. It waits, as she waits, endlessly patient, endlessly desiring. The souls who enter her realm do not become her lovers, but they do become her companions. Each one she receives with the same unyielding embrace. She is both cradle and grave, both beginning and ending. And in this there is a tenderness most cannot understand. The living imagine her cold,
unfeeling, merciless, but those who have crossed her threshold know differently. They know the way her presence quiets fear, the way her gaze strips away pretense, the way her silence holds them closer than any song could.
It is in this contradiction, feared above yet cherished below, that hell's allure lies. She is the goddess who cannot be escaped, yet also the goddess who is always near. She is solitude personified, yet never alone. She is rejection made sovereign, yet her very rejection becomes the deepest intimacy. Other figures pass through her story, shadows that frame her light. Odin, who cast her down, lingers as the stern hand of fate. The dead, countless and nameless, murmur in her halls, filling the silence with their sighs. Even her brothers, Fenrir, the wolf, and Jormungandr, the serpent, haunt the edges of her tale, symbols of destruction and boundary. Yet they are not her equals here. They are not the heart of this myth. Hell alone is its center, its pulse, its breath. She is not a goddess of glory, nor of fertile fields, nor of shining seas. She does not promise abundance or triumph. She promises only herself. The embrace of inevitability, the paradox of desire entwined with dread. And in that promise, she is magnetic. For when one dares to imagine her, not as caricature, not as terror, but as woman, as goddess, as presence, the heart stirs in ways it does not wish to confess. It flinches at the sight of decay, yes, but it also lingers, fascinated by the beauty that remains beside it. It recoils from the silence, but also yearns for its peace. It fears her touch, but in secret it longs for it. For who would not want to be seen fully, known completely, held without pretense? This is hell, revealed not as monster, but as mistress, not as punishment, but as paradox, half beautiful, half decayed, yet wholly magnetic. Feared, yes, misunderstood endlessly, desired though none dare speak it aloud. In her dual form, the living confront the truth they cannot escape, that death itself is not only terror, but seduction.
Power is a crown that weighs heavy even when it is inevitable. Hell was given dominion not because she sought it, but because Odin decreed it. In her banishment she became a queen, yet one whose throne was born of rejection. The paradox coils around her heart. She reigns sovereign, and yet she reigns alone. And in that solitude blooms a hunger more piercing than frost, the desire to be seen, not as punishment, not as shadow, but as woman. The living imagine her halls as dreadful, bleak, barren, yet in truth they are filled with endless company. The souls of the dead arrive without ceasing, drawn to her domain by the slow gravity of mortality. They stumble into her mists like travelers collapsing at the end of a long road. Some weep, some rage, some cling desperately to the memory of warmth, but in time all fall silent, their breaths blending with her fog. And yet, for all this company, hell is not known. She holds them, yes, but none dares to see her fully. To them she is the boundary itself, the moment their journey ends, the figure they cannot refuse. They kneel, they yield, but they do not understand. And in the deepest chambers of her solitude, this truth aches within her like ice against bone. She does not long for worship nor for power. She longs to be touched, not by fear, but by recognition. Her body, divided, tells her story to every eye that dares to look. One half glows with vitality, skin like pale dawn, lips soft, eyes gleaming with life. The other half carries the whisper of the grave, the inevitability of decay. To mortals and gods alike, this duality is unsettling, a contradiction they cannot embrace. They recoil, they murmur, "Monster." They turn away. But what she feels is not monstrosity, it is truth, it is wholeness. She is both beauty and ruin, both flame and ash. And it is this wholeness she yearns for another to recognize, to desire, to cherish. For in her gaze, the dead are seen completely, stripped of pretense, their masks of glory and failure alike dissolved. Why then should she not also be seen in her fullness? Why should she be condemned to the shadows of half-acceptance, feared for what she cannot hide?
This is her conflict between ruler and woman, between goddess and soul. She must hold the dead with certainty, never faltering, never revealing the tremor of her longing. She must be unyielding frost. And yet, beneath that frost there is fire, restless and unfulfilled. Every sigh of a soul that passes into her arms is an echo of what she desires herself. Closeness, surrender, intimacy, untainted by terror. There are moments when she lingers near the newly arrived, a sailor drowned at sea, shivering in the fog of her realm. A mother torn from her child, eyes still wet with longing. A youth struck down too soon, lips trembling with confusion. Hell kneels beside them, and her gaze meets theirs. Some recoil, eyes widening at her half-dark visage. Others shiver, unable to look away from the strange, magnetic beauty of her. In those fleeting moments, she feels something almost like connection. Almost, but never fully. For their hearts are bound to fear, their eyes clouded by finality. The dead belong to her, but not as she yearns for. They surrender because they must, not because they choose. And this truth carves loneliness into her reign more deeply than Odin's decree ever could. She is desired, yes, but desired as one desires oblivion. She is loved, yes, but loved as one loves silence when exhaustion claims them. What she craves is different. What she craves is to be chosen. From the living, she receives nothing but rejection. Their songs speak of her as shadow. Their prayers avoid her name. They celebrate Odin's halls. They fear her threshold. They imagine her embrace not as solace, but as horror. And though she hears their whispers, though she feels their terror like frost against her skin, she remains patient. Still the longing lingers, to be spoken of with reverence, to be dreamed of with desire, to be imagined not as punishment, but as promise. Her emotional battle is unending. Each soul that enters her realm becomes a mirror of her ache. The devotion of the dead comforts her, yet it is never enough. Their surrender is not intimacy, it is inevitability.
Their embrace is not choice, it is decree. And so the more they come, the lonelier she feels. Surrounded, yet unseen. Desired, yet misunderstood.
Sometimes in the stillness, she allows herself to imagine what it might be like to be touched by hands unbound by fear, to feel warmth that does not fade, to hear her name spoken not as dread, but as longing. She imagines lips pressing against hers, not recoiling at the pallor of one side, but lingering on both, accepting her duality, worshipping her wholeness. She imagines a lover who would see her not as death, but as hell, the woman, the goddess, the paradox. But dreams are fragile things, and even in the heart of Niflheim, they dissolve like mist. She wakes always to the same truth. Her realm is eternal, her throne unchallenged, her longing unanswered. She is the queen of death, yet prisoner of her own solitude. And so her desire builds, not diminishing, but deepening, carved into her being as frost carves the stone. The more she waits, the stronger it grows. The more she is denied, the more magnetic she becomes. For desire unfulfilled never weakens. It sharpens. And in Hell's heart, it is honed to a blade of yearning that could cut through even the silence of eternity. Her story is one of contradictions bound together, power and vulnerability, devotion and rejection, intimacy and isolation. She is feared, yet she longs to be adored. She is surrounded, yet she remains alone. She is worshipped unwillingly, yet she craves the willing touch of one who sees her not as an end, but as a beginning. Thus, the conflict of hell is not a clash of armies, nor a battle of gods. It is the quieter, sharper conflict of the heart. A woman cast into shadow, crowned in exile, hungering not for conquest, but for recognition. A goddess whose very form reveals the truth all feared to name, yet who longs to be desired for it, not despite it. And so the tension deepens, drawn taut as frost against branch. The living reject her, the dead surrender without choice, and in between stands hell, magnetic, aching, unyielding. Her longing simmers beneath her rule, a hidden fire that will one day demand release. For every goddess has her desire, and even death itself cannot silence the call of the heart.
There comes a moment in every soul's journey through Hell's realm when resistance fades, not because strength has left them, but because desire has taken its place. At first, they tremble, clutching at the memory of warmth, their breath sharp in the mist. But then the silence deepens, the fog closes in, and Hell herself draws near. And in that instant, they feel what no living being dares to name: intimacy with death, raw and unshrouded. She does not seize them with force. Her power needs no violence. Instead, she moves with slow certainty, her presence settling over them like frost upon still water. Her touch is cool, yet it lingers, spreading along the skin with a softness that disarms. They shudder, not from fear, but from the bewildering tenderness of it. For who would have thought that death could caress? Who would have imagined that the grave could cradle? Hell bends close, and her arms enfold the soul. Her embrace is unlike any mortal's. No heartbeat quickens in her chest, no warmth radiates from her skin. Yet what she gives is deeper than heat. It is surrender. In her embrace, the frantic pace of memory slows, the ache of longing softens, the wounds of life fade into whispers. Her touch does not burn, it cools, it soothes, it settles. And as she draws them into her hold, the soul feels the strange sweetness of release, the forbidden ecstasy of letting go. To describe her body is to describe contradiction made flesh. On one side, the living beauty of a maiden's form, pale skin smooth as ivory, lips parted as though waiting for a kiss, eyes shimmering with the faintest glimmer of warmth. On the other, the pallor of decay, a hollowed cheek, a shadow of bone, the faint perfume of earth after rain. Together, they create a vision both dreadful and irresistible. For in her duality, every secret desire is revealed. To touch her is to touch both life and its end, to feel both the fire of yearning and the cool quiet of fulfillment.
The soul pressed to her chest trembles, caught between dread and desire. They feel the contrast of her skin, the warmth of one side, the chilling pallor of the other against their own fading form. At first they resist, for instinct clings to life even as it slips away. But her voice, low and steady, rises like a whisper through the fog. It is not command, but invitation. It does not demand, but promises. And the soul listens, drawn by the cadence that speaks of inevitability wrapped in tenderness. In her arms, the coldness transforms. It is no longer the absence of warmth, but a new kind of sensation, tingling, numbing, intoxicating. It slides through the body like a lover's breath, not burning, but soothing, not devouring, but possessing. Fear crumbles beneath it. What remains is a shiver of pleasure, sharp and strange, that deepens with every heartbeat until even the memory of dread is gone. This is hell's secret, the climax of her paradox. Death is not emptiness, but intimacy. Her embrace is not annihilation, but consummation. And in her dual form, beauty entwined with decay, she reveals the truth every heart knows but dares not admit, that desire and surrender are inseparable. What is love if not the willingness to yield? What is ecstasy if not the loss of self in another's arms? Death in hell's keeping is but the purest form of both. The soul clings to her, no longer resisting. Their sighs mingle with the mist, their form dissolves against hers, and they are lost, not destroyed, but absorbed, enveloped, cherished. To surrender to hell is to step into forbidden love, terrifying in its inevitability, intoxicating in its tenderness. Her lips, pale and darkened, brush against theirs, a kiss that tastes not of fire, but of snow melting upon the tongue. It is cold, yes, but achingly sweet, lingering longer than any mortal kiss could dare to. She whispers as they yield, and though her words are too soft to remember, their essence remains. You are mine, and you are seen, and in that recognition, the soul finds what it had craved all along, not glory, not fire, not song, but to be fully known, utterly received, held without condition. It is the ecstasy of being desired, even in death, perhaps especially in death.
In these moments, Hell herself is transformed. She is no longer merely queen of shadows, no longer the banished daughter cast into frost. She becomes lover, confessor, sovereign of surrender. The ache within her quiets, if only for an instant, soothed by the intimacy of her touch. For though the souls do not choose her in life, in death they yield completely. And in their yielding she finds a fleeting echo of the recognition she longs for. But desire is never simple. Even as she holds them, even as their breath fades into hers, Hell feels the tension that will never leave her. They embrace her not for who she is, but because they must. Their devotion is deep, but it is born of inevitability. And so her hunger remains, sharpened, deepened, unresolved. She transforms their fear into ecstasy, but her own longing lingers, insatiable. For even in this forbidden climax, she is both fulfilled and denied. The souls whisper her name, some with dread, others with reverence, but always with surrender. In their voices she hears devotion, in their eyes she sees awe. Yet beneath it all she knows the truth. None came willingly, none chose her embrace freely. And so the paradox sharpens, intoxicating and cruel. She is the goddess most intimately known, and yet most deeply unchosen. And yet this is her power. This is the heart of her allure. For what is forbidden love if not the most consuming? What is fear if not the sharpest edge of desire? Hell embodies both, and in doing so, she draws every soul, every whisper, every breath into her keeping. She is the climax of longing itself, the moment when resistance gives way to ecstasy, when terror turns to trembling pleasure, when death becomes not an ending, but an embrace. Her myth at this height is not one of battle or conquest. It is the myth of surrender, the story of how even the strongest will falters, how even the fiercest heart yields, how even the most reluctant lover finally leans into her kiss. And in that kiss lies both terror and tenderness, decay and beauty, dread and desire. She is contradiction made flesh, and in her arms, contradiction becomes intoxicating truth. This is the climax of hell, the moment where her solitude brushes against fulfillment, where her longing wraps itself around the souls who tremble and yield. It is the point where the fear of death reveals itself as the most forbidden seduction, and the goddess of the underworld becomes not only ruler, but lover, not only exile, but sovereign of intimacy.
And when the mist thickens again, when the soul has dissolved into her keeping, silence returns. Yet it is never the same silence as before. It hums with the memory of ecstasy, with the whisper of surrender, with the lingering sweetness of forbidden love. And hell, half beautiful, half decayed, stands at the center of it all, lonely still, but magnetic, eternal, and endlessly desired.
There comes a stillness after every surrender, a silence that lingers like snow upon the earth. In the wake of her embraces, as the last whispers of trembling fade, hell stands alone once more amid the mist of her dominion. Yet she does not falter. The ache remains, the longing burns, but so too does a new certainty, an acceptance that settles upon her like a crown wrought not of gold, but of frost and shadow. Hel is no longer merely the banished daughter of Loki, thrust into exile by the wary hand of Odin. That was the tale written for her, a punishment cloaked in prophecy, a role assigned to contain what the gods could not understand. But here, in the heart of Niflheim, she has remade that role. She has shaped exile into empire, rejection into sovereignty. What began as a sentence has become her throne. And upon that throne she does not weep, she does not beg, she reigns. The souls gathered in her realm know this truth, though they cannot name it. To them, she is not merely the warden of their fate, but the embodiment of its inevitability. They arrive broken, stripped of breath and memory, and she receives them not as jailer, but as queen. Her arms, those contradictory limbs of warmth and pallor, are their final resting place, their final lover, their final sanctuary. In her keeping, they are not abandoned, they are claimed. This is her outcome, her revelation, that the grave is not emptiness, but possession eternal. To be held by hell is not to vanish, but to belong, irrevocably and forever. She walks through her halls of mist with the grace of inevitability. Each soul bows without command, not out of fear alone, but from awe. For she is no longer seen as monstrous, no longer whispered of as curse, but revered as sovereign. In her presence, the trembling becomes devotion, the silence becomes hymn. Even those who feared her embrace in life now long for it in death, for her dominion has become more than shadow. It has become a lure, a sanctuary wrapped in frost and longing.
The gods above may avert their eyes, denying her beauty, denying her throne, but Hel herself no longer seeks their recognition. Their rejection forged her, but it no longer defines her. The solitude that once gnawed at her has hardened into majesty. She has become something greater than even the gods foresaw. The eternal balance, the inescapable embrace, the sovereign of surrender. And she wears her dual form as regalia. Where once she might have wished to conceal the decayed half of her visage, now she reveals it openly, defiantly. Her beauty and her rot are one crown, one symbol, one truth.
that life and death are not rivals, but lovers, bound inseparably. Her allure lies in that paradox, in the trembling desire that springs from dread. None can look upon her without feeling the pull of both fear and fascination. She is irresistible not in spite of her decay, but because of it. The souls gathered in her dominion understand this in ways the living never can. For when they surrender to her, they do not dissolve into nothingness. They are not scattered to the void. They are absorbed, cherished, remembered in her embrace. The living may sing songs of heroes in Valhalla, feasts and battles unending, but in Hell's realm the intimacy runs deeper. Here every soul is seen, every whisper treasured, every surrender eternal. Her kingdom is not made of fire and glory, but of frost and touch, of silence and ecstasy. This is why she is feared. This is why she is worshipped in hushed tones, not because she destroys, but because she transforms. She turns dread into longing, exile into sovereignty, decay into allure. The gods may command, the warriors may rage, but hell waits, inevitable and eternal, and in the end all come to her. She accepts this truth with a stillness that is both cruel and tender. Cruel, for none may escape her grasp. Tender, for none are rejected. Her embrace does not choose, it claims all. Kings and beggars, warriors and children, lovers and foes, all are drawn to her in the end. Her sovereignty is the great equalizer, the final intimacy that spares none one, yet refuses none. And so Hell stands, sovereign in the frost, her throne carved not of jewels, but of inevitability. She no longer seeks to escape her exile, for her exile has become the heart of all things. She no longer yearns for a place among the gods, for they are fleeting, while she is eternal. Even their halls of feasting must one day fall silent, their flames extinguished, their laughter gone. But her dominion will remain, as constant as the cold, as certain as the grave.
It is here, in the outcome of her myth, that her sensual power reaches its truest form. For the allure of hell is not found in fleeting touch, but in inevitability itself. She is the lover none can resist, the sovereign none can escape, the queen whose kiss is promised to every heart. Her dominion is not cruel vengeance, nor hollow punishment. It is the sanctuary of surrender, the place where all longing is finally met. And though she still longs for recognition, still aches in the depths of her solitude, she does not bend beneath it. She carries it like a flame hidden in frost, like a secret folded within silence. For it is her longing that sharpens her allure, her hunger that makes her embrace so intoxicating. She is sovereign, yes, but never complacent. She is eternal, yes, but never sated. Her reign is not static. It is alive with tension, with desire, with the constant pull between cruelty and tenderness, dread and ecstasy. This is her resolution, her outcome, her eternal truth. Hell is queen not because she was given a throne, but because she claimed it. She is sovereign not because the gods decreed it, but because inevitability itself bows to her. Her embrace is not the end, but the beginning of intimacy unending. And so the mist closes once more around her figure, her gaze steady, her voice soft but commanding, her presence magnetic. Souls tremble as they approach, yet they cannot turn away. For to look upon hell is to see both the terror and the tenderness of surrender, to glimpse both the cruelty of inevitability and the strange sweetness of belonging. She is exile no longer. She is punishment no longer. She is sovereign. She is sanctuary. She is the goddess who transforms fear into desire, rejection into devotion, death into love. And her reign, bound in frost and shadow, is eternal. For in the end, all roads lead to her.
There is a silence after all things, a stillness that lingers even after the echo of footsteps has faded. It is in this quiet that the mind wanders to hell, to the frost-laden halls of Niflheim, to the figure who waits at the edge of life and death. She is neither wholly terrible nor wholly beautiful, yet in that tension lies her spell. She exists as a mirror to every mortal's secret longing, the yearning to touch eternity, the fear of oblivion, the seductive pull of what should remain forbidden. To contemplate hell is to contemplate the paradox of desire itself. She embodies what is feared and what is craved, entwining beauty and decay, warmth and chill, intimacy and distance. Her gaze pierces not merely the flesh, but the soul, seeing every hidden ache, every unspoken longing, every flutter of want. She knows the fragility of life and the inevitability of death, and in that knowledge she becomes the ultimate reflection of human longing for permanence, for connection, for surrender without reprieve. In her realm, death is not a cessation, but a transformation. The souls that arrive tremble, hearts suspended between dread and fascination, unsure whether to resist or yield. Hell's dual form, half radiant, half rotted, captures the contradiction that lies at the heart of desire. Attraction is entwined with repulsion. Surrender is colored with fear. Every breath, every shiver, every glance within Niflheim becomes a testament to the magnetic tension she evokes. She teaches that intimacy need not be soft or simple. It can be chilling, intoxicating, and infinite. Yet hell is more than just a seductress of the dead. She is a guide, a sovereign, a reflection of truths mortals often shy away from. In her cold embrace lies the invitation to understand that mortality is not the enemy of passion, nor the decay the enemy of beauty. Life and death are entwined lovers.
their steps woven into every heartbeat, every fleeting caress, every whispered desire. Hell stands at the crossroads of these extremes, embodying the paradox of existence, making it tangible, making it intoxicating.
Consider for a moment the pull of her presence. Even the living, who have never felt her touch, carry a shadow of her influence. They shiver in the chill of uncertainty, in the dread of what is inevitable, in the strange allure of forbidden desire. Hell is always waiting, her gaze unseen but sensed, her form whispered in dreams, her frost brushing the skin of those who fear mortality, yet ache to understand it. She is not merely death, but the eternal reflection of what is denied in life. Surrender without shame, desire without restraint, the simultaneous terror and ecstasy of the unknown. In this reflection, one begins to see the shape of intimacy hell represents. True connection, the kind that reaches beneath appearances and grasps the essence of being, cannot exist without risk. Hell embodies that risk. Her embrace is total. There is no turning away. She offers recognition and touch, but only at the price of yielding fully to what one most fears. In that yielding, there is liberation, there is ecstasy, there is understanding. For the living, to imagine her is to imagine the culmination of all unspoken longings, the ultimate surrender to what is both feared and desired. Her duality serves as a constant reminder that desire is never simple. Half of her glows with beauty, warmth, and promise. The other half withers, cold, and reminds us of mortality. In her visage, one sees both the allure of life and the inevitability of decay. Yet it is precisely in this duality that fascination thrives. We are drawn to her because she represents what we cannot fully control, what we cannot fully comprehend, the entwining of attraction and repulsion, of longing and dread, of life and death. She is the seduction of the forbidden made manifest. And what of her throne, her halls, her dominion? They are more than physical spaces. They are a reflection of the human psyche. Each corridor of frost, each echoing whisper, each shadowed corner represents the hidden corridors of our own fears and desires. To journey through Niflheim is to journey inward, to confront the parts of ourselves we resist, deny, or ignore. Hell does not punish, she illuminates. She turns our dread into reflection, our fear into fascination, our isolation into the understanding that surrender can be exquisite. The intimacy she evokes is unlike any other. It is neither fleeting nor fragile. It is not bound by touch alone, but by the surrender of spirit, the recognition of limits, the acknowledgement of longing. In yielding to hell, the soul understands the paradox of existence, that fear enhances pleasure, that boundaries heighten desire, that the shadow is as essential as the light. In this, she is both teacher and temptress, sovereign and lover, death and ecstasy, entwined in a single, unyielding presence. Even as we contemplate her, Hell remains elusive. She is never fully present in the waking world, yet her influence is unmistakable. Every shadow, every cold gust of wind, every whispered legend carries a trace of her essence. She is felt before she is seen, understood before she is encountered, desired before she is embraced. The pull she exerts is subtle, yet inexorable, drawing the mind and heart into contemplation, into longing, into surrender. She is not merely a myth, but a living reflection of the tension between what is safe and what is necessary, what is feared and what is craved. Her story is timeless, not merely because of her origins among the gods, but because she embodies a truth every human must face: that intimacy is never without risk, that desire is never without contradiction, that mortality is inseparable from the longing for eternity. Hell stands at the threshold of all these truths, an eternal sentinel whose embrace is simultaneously terrifying and magnetic. She reminds us that surrender can be liberating, that fear can be exquisite, that longing can be a path to transcendence. And so the reflection lingers, the echo of frost, the brush of shadow, the whisper of inevitability. Hell waits, always, at the edge of perception, at the border between life and death, at the boundary between fear and desire. She waits not as a horror to repel, but as a dark, sensual embrace to draw near. To imagine her is to feel the pull of all that is forbidden yet irresistible. To remember her is to carry a tremor of longing within, a subtle ache that persists beyond the telling of the tale. In the final reckoning, Hell becomes more than a figure of myth. She becomes a mirror. She reflects the deepest desires and fears, the hidden wishes and unspoken longings, the paradoxical attraction to what is inevitable. In her presence, one is reminded that intimacy, desire, and mortality are intertwined, that attraction and repulsion are but two faces of the same coin, that surrender, when met with understanding and care, can be both terrifying and intoxicating. She is always waiting, in the cold mist, in the hush of shadows, in the echo of silence. She waits, not as a monster to flee, not as a curse to dread, but as a dark, sensual embrace that calls to the soul. She waits to teach the exquisite tension between life and death, desire and fear, solitude and surrender. She waits to show that in the inevitability of mortality lies the most intoxicating intimacy. And in that waiting, in that eternal stillness, Hell becomes unforgettable. She leaves a mark not on flesh, but on the mind, the imagination, the longing heart. She is haunting, magnetic, and irresistible. Her touch is felt long after the story ends. Her gaze lingers beyond the final whisper. Her presence remains in the quiet spaces of thought and dream. She is Hell. She is inevitable. She is desire. She is the frost that burns, the shadow that draws, the silence that speaks. She waits, always.